Good. Okay, so today in the Impact Room, I'm joined by Manoj Sangany, who's a Head of Customer Success and a Scale-Up Accelerator, presently working with Incepteo. They're an innovation-led idea-to-market technology partner, delivering impactful solutions for startup and scale-ups. Manoj is also a men's mental health voice and runs the Mindful Men's Club. Manoj, hi, lovely to see you again today. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Michelle.
No, not at all. Lovely to have you, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from you. So what would you say is your elevator pitch then?
Oh, good question. I think I'll tell you what my ingredients are for the elevator pitch, because I think an elevator pitch for me personally evolves depending on the audience I'm with, who's in front of me. So I think it's like a good book, really. So it's got to have a good, captivating title for you to pick up the cover, and I guess that's a authentic introduction for me. And the second bit, it's got to have a good beginning. And the beginning is a reference to your why. So who are you? So people buy of people. That narrative is very, very true. And I think the middle bit is really about some kind of evidence-based examples, not theoretical, how you've actually helped a customer with a real example that is synergistic with the service you're providing, because I think people have to have a commonality in that narrative and really sort of relate to what you're saying. And I think the end, which is the most important bit, which some people sort of leave out, is what value can you actually add without actually sounding anything to do with salesy. So generally, like, what value can you give up front? So I think, yeah, those bits and pieces would be kind of my ingredients, if you like, for an elevator pitch. But it's always the same with those ingredients, but I kind of change the narrative depending on who I'm talking to. Yeah, and I think a great tip that I learned, maybe that might help some of your audience, and I'm sure loads of your audience have already heard of this, which is the famous golden circle example from Simon Sinek. Great TEDx talk. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out, because he talks about the what, why, and how people get it wrong in the reverse order. So yeah, that's definitely what's helped me.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, a great starter there. And yeah, I listened to him a fair bit. And I know even just those tips that you've given, they'll help an awful lot of people, or certainly people that I speak to for sure. So when we last spoke, you talked about startups, and that's a world you know very well, and the failures you had also had in the startup world versus your successes. So, I mean, how important were those failures, do you think, for you and in terms of where you are today?
I think in the moment, nobody wants those failures. I think that's the honest answer. But I think with hindsight, nobody, I think no entrepreneur on this planet would probably change the failures, because it's probably those failures that have led to larger successes. And almost like it helps you sharpen your sword, keeps, I guess, your radar alert in terms of trust, in terms of credibility. And I think it's absolutely essential. I think, and I haven't read any book or podcast or come across any entrepreneur who said to me, I've never failed in life. I mean, there may be, but I haven't come across any yet. So I think it's actually essential. And I think I'd go one step further. And I think you need to learn how to fall in love with failure. So what I mean by that is you need to embrace failure, because if you don't embrace failure, you're stagnating innovation. And for me, it's as simple as that.
You hear it so often, don't you? But I don't think society is taught though that. Is it, when, as you say, I'm yet to see an entrepreneur or a podcast or a performance that doesn't talk about it. Yet, our children or even us as adults, it's not something we do all fear failure often, don't we? That's true.
Yeah, I think fear is definitely real. I can give you many examples in life where I've feared something, but I think having that fear of not succeeding is probably the biggest hindrance to everyone moving forward. And I think I've definitely been a sort of victim of that, but I've learned to embrace it along the way. But I didn't wake up embracing, if that makes sense. I had to realize that and think, oh, actually, that was a good lesson I learned then. And it was with smaller expenditure in terms of expense, smaller exposure, in terms of directorship or whatever that is. But I think, yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, but in the moment, I did have lots of regrets in the moment. But right now, I definitely, honestly, would not change any of them.
Yeah, great. Okay. So, I mean, looking to work and failure or success, I mean, why do you think there is such a low project success rate across, software and technology development and delivery?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure what the exact stats are. It depends on which source you reference and which kind of white papers you read, but it's anywhere between 40 to 85%, which is horrendous. That's really high. Um, I think there's many reasons why software technology projects fail. I think the biggest sort of learning curve that we've seen from our clients when they've come in saying, "Oh, can you help? Can you help us with their business, whatever that may be, in whatever vertical?" It's because they haven't done the due diligence upfront prior to investing any funds. So what I mean by that is that whatever they're building software-wise, whether it's an app, a website, or Web 2, Web 3 solution, they just haven't done enough due diligence, and they've taken a shortcut of going to somebody who, and it's not always right or wrong, I'm saying this, but this is just my own experience, somebody who's cheaper, accessible at the time, but then they're not accessible during the project or post project. And I think whoever you go with, communication has to be key. And I think in a commercial agreement, whether it's a proposal or contract or any legal binding agreement, you have to be upfront with what you can honestly deliver consistently, and you'll be measured, by that, and your reputation is staked on that. So I think due diligence is, there's many, but due diligence and finding the right persons or partner is probably the best bit to slow down and do that properly and actually speak to people. It's like you wouldn't do a house renovation unless you, I don't know, giving you a personal example, but I actually went, before I sort of vetted any builders, I actually had to see some of the work they did. Well, why is it different in software projects? It's like one of the biggest investments you're going to make business wise in terms of your strategy, which is critical. And why wouldn't you do that due diligence? I think so. Yeah, many reasons, but I think doing due diligence with whoever you're going with, to making sure that they're the right fit. And I don't just mean technology wise, cost wise, but actually people fit. Do you actually like them? Do you get on with them? Can you communicate with them on your level? So I think, yeah, that would be the main.
Yeah, so many common factors, I think, not just with generally software and technology change, but any sort of change, really. I mean, that seems to be fundamentally why most of it fails, because change is really hard, isn't it? We all know it, but people do want to maybe take a shortcut, or grab a shiny new thing, or somebody's promising them the world, aren't they? And they just think, oh, that's great, it's going to fix a problem, but all too often creates far more with it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good. So outside of your day job, I know you do a lot of great work, particularly with men through the Mindful Men's Club that we talked about. How do you think the last few years have affected men or generally people due to the challenges and the demands that have been placed upon us or have changed?
Oh, yeah, that's a big question. Lots of ways. I have definitely been affected big time over the last few years in my own personal journey. I know close friends and family have, and I know men in general have that I've spoken to. Obviously, the talks that we do are private, over a Zoom session that are not recorded, but massively, I would say. I think the catalyst of releasing that conversation, if that's the right narrative to use, was during COVID. I think people had to become more insular because obviously restrictive on movement, and etc. But as they did that, they actually were finding out that they were more self-aware, and me being included. So I think through that whole transition of kind of, I guess, locking down environments, both in your mind, your physical environment where you are, I think that transformation of change has come about. But I think men in general still, I know there's lots on LinkedIn, which makes me smile, and lots of men are talking about mental health, but it's still not enough. It probably represents under 10% of men, if I have to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I mean, why do you think that is? Why are they so reluctant to talk?
I think it's just fear of judgment is the honest answer, especially the more senior you go, because it comes with certain expectations and judgment that if I say something, is my business going to be impacted? Uh, I mean, quite often the people closest to them aren't even aware what they're going through. So quite often they might say, "Oh, is my family or friends watching?" And what would they think? So I think it's that fear word again, isn't it? Really, it's like you just remind me. So it's like it's Halloween, right? And something's just come into my head. Like I think we all wear masks at Halloween, but I think we need to learn to take off our masks
Mm,
and show our true selves. So I think that's
mm.
something that's just popped in my head. But I think it's easier said than done. But I know it was a liberating feeling when I shared my story. And I'm really comfortable. And in fact, I'll go beyond that. I love talking about mental health. So I think, but it takes that shift. You can't just share it with anyone in any environment. It's got to be the right environment, the right circumstances, and the right reasons. Like you have to want to share it because you feel that there's a transformative thing happening in you, if that makes sense. And therefore you sharing it, that's a byproduct of the weight being lifted. But that's not your reason why, if that makes sense. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
No, thank you very much for that insight. So, I mean, look, if we look at business leaders and they, want to improve that health and opportunity strategy available to their leadership team and employees, based on what you're saying, from a male perspective. I mean, I've talked to in other of these impact rooms about the female initiative, so we can sort of talk to male or any employer really. I mean, what advice would you give them? How do you think that they can help?
Massively. I mean, they've got so much power to help. I think there's a bit of a misfallacy that exists in business where the reasons why businesses fail. And to me, the biggest reason is not recognizing and the talent that businesses have. That's the number one, and I'm speaking from personal experience. And the second is not having the right leadership or not enabling their leadership team to unleash that talent, because attrition is a huge cost to any business. And more, I think there's a hidden cost to attrition because it's the talent that they let go that they never would have discovered what they might discover, whether it's a great product or optimizing their service. But I think, yeah, talking to my peers, and that's the biggest two themes that keep recurring. So I think the power, and it applies to men and women, I think the power is all within us. But how often do we actually look around saying, oh, have I created a communication channel to actually ensure that? And I'm not just talking about HR leaders, and I've got tons of friends who are HR leaders. I'm talking about it applies at all departments, all levels. That what have you actually done to open up the channel of communication that somebody could generally approach you and share something without being judged in terms of whether that's in their probation, because let's be honest with you, people are always tight-lipped in probation periods, or whether that's post-probation. So I tend to start my mornings, my stand-up mornings with my team with literally, how was your weekend? And it's not a superficial question. It's no, literally, how was your weekend? So I think we need to humanize the conversation in the workplace a lot more, and that itself will open up the channels. But I think, yeah, recognize the talent that you have and recognize how to unleash the talent, I would say.
I think that opportunity to be an authentic leader and take that time to listen is something a lot of businesses struggle with, don't they? We're all so busy, and it's just sort of, we'll ask how people are, but are we really listening? Have we really heard what they've said, and are we making that time, as an organization for people to do that? I think, that's something that perhaps what you were saying there, I think is really sort of critical, but businesses don't make time for that, do they? Very often,
Mm,
that sort of human connection, or we as individuals don't make time, and that seems to me what you sort of highlighted or said a little bit too there. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, Michelle. I think another thing you just remind me of is that appraisals and one-to-ones, like sometimes they're just done as a tick in a box
Mm,
exercise,
mm,
or in some cases at least I've experienced working in other businesses. But when you actually have an appraisal, and I'm not sure if anyone of the audience agrees, but I love going to an appraisal because I know within reason, give or take 10-20% where the conversation is going to go. So I do my homework. And I think more powerful than that is your team looking forward to an appraisal is a great sign of a real leader, because it means that you've had micro touch points along the way before that appraisal, in terms of how they're doing, not just their performance, their well-being, how they're doing as a person. Are you inspiring them? Do they need another project outside of the role and responsibilities that you've hired from them? That always works for me. So always give someone something that is a project that's actually got nothing to do with their role, but has got everything to do with the talent and their interests. And that always has helped me with a really, really low attrition rate in teams. So I think it's very true. Time is a factor, but it's again, it's something that's in our power, but I think we take it for granted. And then we have the conversation when somebody hands a resignation letter, it's too late then.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if you look back at your career, who do you have most to thank for some advice, mentorship, or guidance then, which really helped you?
Oh, loads of people. I think I think first of all it's thankful to all the bad leaders, because I think without them I wouldn't know how to treat people the right way. So I think I'm immensely, it sounds a bit odd, but I'm actually grateful for all those leaders. But I think a couple, there's a few. I mean, you want to name names or?
If you want to, it's your platform, whatever. You
Okay,
don't have to, or you
okay.
can.
Um, yeah, I think Simon from Fourth Hospitality was an amazing leader. There's been so many. Again, Tony. I think Steve from Williams Lee Tag. My current CEO, because I didn't meet him in a traditional circumstances. So if you like. So yeah, CK. He's known as Chaitanya Kumar. So many. There's probably the list is big. The
Excellent.
list is big.
And
You've
it's
reminded me I need to send a gratitude post out on LinkedIn. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point about learning from bad leaders is so important as well, because I know you asked me about why I do what I do and
Mm,
things, and I would never have set a business up had I have had great leadership. I did it because the leadership was so poor around
mm,
me, and I didn't like what it created for customers or employees. So I think learning from the bad as well as the good. But thankfully, it seems you've had a lot of good, and hopefully, that will sort of, you can put your gratitude post out now and sort of pass that,
absolutely.
pay it forward.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, what advice would you give to an individual with a great startup or idea, or perhaps if they are embarking on a large transformational sort of technology program?
As in how they would start or launch that, or just in general? Or
Yeah, just in terms of your experience,
I
I
think,
guess.
yeah, I think the first thing that comes about is the why question again. Don't do it to chase money. You will fail, because I've been there, and it just doesn't work, and it's not a long lasting effect, and it's not strong enough. So I think your why has to be good, and what I mean by that is like you have to sometimes, like you said, I think your example is a really good one. So that's a strong why. Like, had you have had good leaders, you could have said you'd had a successful career, but we wouldn't be talking right now. So, depends which way you look at that. But because of that circumstance, then your idea was born, or certainly that was a catalyst. So I think having through lived experience a real reason why you're starting your business is absolutely fundamental, because it relates to a proper story that you can share with others and investors and co-directors. And I think second is you have to solve a fundamental problem or add value to something even more that exists. So I think those two things are the most important. And the third thing is don't keep the idea in your head, because the amount of people I speak to says, "Oh, I've got an idea," and it's the same conversation a year later. "Oh, I've got an idea. What do you think?" I'm like, "Have you done anything with the advice you were given the previous year or yesteryear, if you like?" So fail fast, fail forward, do your due diligence, but don't procrastinate, because perfection does not exist in business.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. And Manoj, then finally, I mean, you've spoken publicly about your own issues, with depression, and it's got really bad for you. And you said talked about anxiety, etc. So you didn't feel like you could reach out and speak to people at the time. I mean, what would you say to someone who may be feeling similarly to yourself? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think probably the most important question I think is that you're not alone. There are people listening, and sometimes it's the people outside of your circle of influence or your network that you'd least expect that actually you'll get the most out of. And obviously you may not know who they are, but I think keep living life, keep showing up, and I think you'd be surprised who you meet in that journey. And when it's the right time, share because you want to share, not don't share because someone's telling you to share. You know, it's that kind of, we all have ups and downs, but I think it's no different, right? Like, you know, we were just talking about walking, weren't we, earlier on, and how essential that is. Well, we talk about the body, but we don't talk about the mental side of it, and we don't talk about, everyone talks about meditation, but what is meditation? Meditation is just taking a moment out of your busy day just to pause and reflect. And I think if you're pausing and reflecting, there's many ways to express yourself. So if you can't find someone to talk to, what I used to do in the early stages, I think I still do now. Yeah, I do. I don't do it as frequently, but I journal a lot. I absolutely, I mean, I swear by journaling, but there's different ways of journaling. You can leave a voice note to yourself on a recording. You can put pen to paper. You can express yourself through writing, which is something I love doing. And yeah, definitely confide in someone that you trust. And that's a big word, isn't it? That scary word, trust. It's that, oh, if I share this with somebody, are they going to then share it with somebody else? Because it's really sensitive information or it's part of your story. But I think once you do share it, you realize, oh, I didn't realize you're going through that same thing. You get that kind of echo chamber, almost like a mirror. And then I think that liberates them even further. And then I remember when we first set up Mindful Men's Club, all the men were hidden behind the camera. And it's no judgment from me or any of the team. It's natural because they're thinking, who are these guys? We've heard a lot about them, but they're on camera. So it was like 4 of us on camera, I think, for about good 4 or 5 sessions. And then slowly, every single person came off camera, but that takes time and trust takes time. So I think, I think, reminder that you're definitely not alone. Express yourself the way you feel natural. For me, I love walking amongst nature, so that reminds me that, you know, there's a lot to be grateful for. And I think once you do share in whatever forum or space that you find, and I think it goes for men and women, by the way. I didn't mention 40% of our audience on Facebook are women. So even though the group's set up for men, and a lot of the topics, majority of them, and this might be a shocker for a lot of the men listening, are actually from women who private message us.
Yeah, great. Well, very interesting and really sound advice. Thank you very much for sharing that. Anything else, Manoj?
No, I just want to immense gratitude for you for reaching out to me, and I enjoyed our talks, and keep doing what you're doing, and I do read your articles, so thank you for having me, really, and thank you for anybody who's listening.
Yeah, thank you. It's been lovely to learn more about you, Manoj.
Likewise, thank you, Michelle.